Katharina Hoffman, 29 years old, heiress to a $500 million pharmaceutical empire, had everything in life except the one thing that really mattered to her, her $2 million Ferrari LaFerrari, which had been out of commission for 3 weeks after Germany's best mechanics declared the engine beyond repair. When Stefan Muller, 31, a garage mechanic with oil-smeared hands, dared to say that he could repair it, Katharina burst out in sarcastic laughter and issued a challenge that would change both their lives. "If you repair my luxury car, I'll marry you." Stefan accepted with a confident smile. What happened in the next few hours proved that true luxury cannot be bought with money, but is conquered with the passion and skill of those who truly understand what it means to love cars. Munich, October 2024. The Mueller Motors workshop in the Giesing district looked like a forgotten piece of industrial history, but behind these peeling walls lay the best-kept secret of Munich mechanics. Stefan Muller, years old, had inherited not only the workshop from his grandfather, but also a rare gift. His hands could talk to engines like others talk to musical instruments. Growing up among wrenches and pistons, Stefan had developed an almost mystical relationship with automobiles. He didn't just repair them, he understood them, felt them, knew what an engine was thinking from the sound it made. While other mechanics consulted manuals and computers, he listened to the heartbeat of the mechanics and found the problem with an intuition that defied all logic. On that October morning, he was working on a 1975 BMW 2002 when he heard the unmistakable roar of a Ferrari V12 engine approaching his neighborhood. But the sound wasn't right. There were dissonances, irregularities that only an experienced ear could detect. Something was wrong with this masterpiece of engineering. From the workshop door, he saw the most beautiful car he had ever seen in person appear, a Ferrari LaFerrari in flaming red, a work of art worth €2 million, which jerked forward and coughed like a wounded giant. At the wheel sat the most fascinating and irritating woman he had ever met. Katharina Hoffman, years old, was the last heir to the Hoffman pharmaceutical dynasty, an empire worth €500 million. Tall, blonde, with green eyes that could melt or freeze ice, she wore a white escad dress that cost more than Stefan earned in a month. But what stood out most was not her beauty or her wealth. It was the despair masked by anger that radiated from her face. When she got out of the Ferrari, Katharina was furious. She had taken her car to the best Ferrari specialists in Germany. Munich, Stuttgart, even flown to Maranello. Everyone had tried, everyone had failed. The LaFerrari's hybrid engine had developed such a complex problem that not even the engineers at the parent company knew how to solve it. They had told her that it might be better to replace the entire engine unit and spend another $800,000. For Katharina, this Ferrari wasn't just a car, it was the birthday present she had given herself the year before. The symbol of her independence, the only thing in her life that she hadn't inherited but had chosen herself. It was her escape from business meetings, family expectations, the burden of a surname that came with enormous responsibilities. When she drove this machine, she felt free, alive, herself. Stefan approached it with the respect one owes to a sick work of art. While Katharina listed all the mechanics who had failed, he walked around the Ferrari like a doctor studying a complex patient. He did not look at it with eyes of desire or envy, but with those of professional understanding. When Stefan asked to hear the engine, Katharina looked at him as if he were crazy. A quarter mechanic who wanted to lay his hands on her LaFerrari after the best specialists in Europe had failed. It was ridiculous, but there was something in the way he looked at the car, a quiet confidence that had nothing to do with arrogance. Katharina explained in an icy tone that this car was worth more than the entire workshop, that the best Ferrari mechanics had been trying for weeks. What made him think he could do what they hadn't been able to do? Stefan smiled. It was a smile that was neither humble nor presumptuous, but simply confident. He explained that they knew the manuals. He knew the cars. Katharina burst out laughing, but it was not a laugh of joy. It was the bitter laugh of someone who had lost too many hopes. Then she issued the challenge that would change everything. If he, a quarter mechanic, could repair her Ferrari, which even the specialists had failed to fix, she would marry him. The irony was sharp, the sarcasm obvious, but Stefan wasn't offended. He looked her in the eye and simply accepted the agreement. He had two conditions: hours without interference and that she stopped calling him a quarter mechanic and started calling him Stefan. There was something about this man that Katerina couldn't figure out. He didn't seem impressed by her wealth, intimidated by her beauty, or even particularly interested in her provocation. He just seemed competent, against all logic, against all common sense. Katerina accepted. She left the keys to her $2 million Ferrari with a mechanic she didn't know, in a workshop that looked like it came from the 1970s. It was the craziest thing she had ever done in her perfectly planned life. But as she walked away from the workshop, she couldn't stop thinking about those confident eyes and those hands that promised impossible miracles. The first few hours were a silent duel between man and machine. Stefan had opened the hood of the Ferrari with the reverence one would use to open a sacred chest. What he saw left him breathless. It wasn't just an engine, it was a work of art in engineering. The hybrid V12 represented the best of Ferrari technology, a concentration of performance and innovation that few mechanics worldwide had seen up close. But Stefan was not intimidated by the complexity. He began to dismantle the engine piece by piece, not following manuals or diagrams, but following an instinct refined over 20 years of work. Each component was examined, cleaned, and tested. It wasn't just about repairing, it was about understanding. As he worked, he began to identify the problem. The Ferrari mechanics had focused on the electronic part, on the management of the hybrid system, on sensors and computers. But the real problem was more subtle, older. It lay in the millimeter-precise synchronization between the combustion engine and the electric motor. A problem that couldn't be seen on computers, but could be felt in the breath of the machine. Meanwhile, Katerina couldn't concentrate on anything. She had tried to work, to follow business meetings, to maintain her normal routine, but her thoughts kept returning to that workshop, to that man who had promised the impossible with a certainty that had affected her more than she wanted to admit. The first day passed without any news. Katerina resisted the temptation to check. She had given her word, no interference for hours. But curiosity was eating away at her. Who was Stefan Mueller really? How could he be so sure he could achieve what others had failed to do? That evening, she did something she had never done before. She searched for information about him. She discovered that Mueller Motors had been in business for 3 generations, that Stefan had a legendary reputation among true classic car enthusiasts, that he had turned down job offers from prestigious car manufacturers in order to remain loyal to his neighborhood workshop. The more she read, the more she realized that perhaps her sarcastic provocation was directed at the wrong man, or perhaps the right one. On the second day, Stefan made the discovery that would change everything. Hidden deep in the energy management system, he found a component that no one had thought of, a small vibration sensor that coordinated the transition between the electric motor and the combustion engine. The sensor worked perfectly after all the tests, but Stefan noticed that its calibration was off by 3 milliseconds. 3 milliseconds. A blink of an eye, a trifle that no computer had detected, but enough to destabilize the entire system. It would have been impossible for a normal mechanic to discover. For Stefan, who felt the breath of the machines, it was as obvious as a cry of pain. The repair required surgical precision. It wasn't enough to replace the part. It had to be recalibrated manually, millimeter by millimeter, until the perfect synchronization was found. It was a job that only someone who truly understood the soul of this machine could do. As Stefan worked with absolute concentration, his hands moved with the grace of a pianist performing a concert. He wasn't just repairing an engine, he was bringing a dream to life. At midnight on the second day, the miracle happened. Stefan turned the key and the V12 of the LaFerrari roared to life with a sound that was pure mechanical poetry. There were no more misfires, no more hesitations. The engine sang its perfect song, the one its designers had dreamed of and which it could now finally express. Stefan smiled. It wasn't just professional pride. It was the grunt of someone who had given something beautiful its soul back. He picked up the phone and wrote a message to Katerina. Your Ferrari is ready, and so is our agreement. On the other side of town, Katerina read the message with her heart pounding. He had really done it. He had really repaired her impossible LaFerrari, but now she had to ask herself an even more complicated question. Was she ready to keep her promise? The next morning, Katerina came to the workshop wearing jeans and a white shirt, casual clothing that was revolutionary for her. Do you like this story? Give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue with the video. Stefan waited next to the Ferrari, which now radiated a completely different aura of vitality. When she got into the car and turned the key, the V12 roared to life with a perfect roar. It was the sound she had been dreaming of for weeks. The Ferrari responded to every command with millimeter precision, accelerating with breathtaking fluidity. It wasn't just repaired, it was perfect. Stefan explained that the specialists looked at computers. He had listened to the machine. Every Ferrari had a personality. It felt misunderstood, unable to express what it wanted to say. Katerina understood that for Stefan, this was not rhetoric. It was lived truth. This man saw machines as living beings, treated them with respect and love. He was different from all the men she had known, who were focused only on numbers and profits. When Stefan told her that it was now up to her to keep the agreement, Katerina really looked at him for the first time. Beyond the oil-stained hands, beyond the work clothes, she saw an intelligent, confident, passionate man who had done the impossible. Not to impress her, but out of pure professional passion. Stefan explained that if he had to marry someone, he wanted it to be someone who appreciated the beautiful things in life for what they were, not for show. It was the most honest answer she had ever heard. No one had ever looked beyond her wealth to see her heart. When she suggested going for a drink, she felt as excited as a teenager on a first date. The pub, Zur Alten Post, was small, loud, and full of workers and pensioners playing cards. The decor was stuck in the 1980s. Coffee cost $1. Katerina had never been to a place like this before and discovered that she liked its authentic simplicity. Stefan ordered 2 coffees. When Katerina asked him to tell her about himself, Stefan explained that he was born in the area, had inherited the workshop, and had never left Munich. By her standards, he was probably a failure. Katerina interrupted him. He had just achieved something that the best engineers in Europe had failed to do. He had incredible talent. But when she confessed that she had never really chosen anything in her life except this Ferrari, they looked into each other's eyes and the noise of the pub disappeared. Something arose between them. Stefan gently touched her hand. What he felt had nothing to do with the bet. If she really wanted to marry him, it would be because they had found something real together. Katerina said with a trembling voice that this bet had been the smartest thing she had ever done. When they kissed, she understood that true love tastes like a $1 coffee and smells like motor oil on the hands of those who can work miracles. The following months were complex and beautiful. The news of the heiress dating a mechanic made the rounds in Munich salons. Katerina's family organized a war council. Her father summoned her angrily to his office. Stefan also had to endure pressure from his world, friends and family, who didn't understand. But Katerina had begun spending time in the workshop as a volunteer apprentice. Stefan taught her the basics of mechanics, and she discovered a natural talent and passion she didn't know she had. Her hands, which had previously only known keyboards and documents, began to get dirty with oil and feel the satisfaction of manual labor. The turning point came when Katerina suggested investing in the workshop to expand it. She wanted to create the most advanced classic car restoration center in Germany, not to buy it from him, but to build together what they loved. The first time they said, "I love you" to each other was in the workshop with greasy hands. 6 months later, Müller-Hoffmann Classic Cars had become the most exclusive restoration destination in Europe. Katerina had become a specialist restorer, combining scientific precision with a passion for mechanics. Stefan proposed to her in the workshop in front of the LaFerrari from their first meeting. The ring was a small golden gear wheel. Love, too, only works when all the parts fit together perfectly. 2 years after this impossible bet, the wedding of Katerina Hoffmann and Stefan Müller had become the most eagerly awaited and unexpected event of the year. They did not marry in a golden cathedral or a princely villa, but in the courtyard of their workshop, which had been transformed into the temple of German automotive engineering for the occasion. Instead of traditional flowers, the most beautiful cars they had ever restored were on display. A 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO, a 1966 Lamborghini Miura, a 1973 Porsche 911 Carrera RS. Each machine told a story. Each restoration had been an act of love for beauty and perfection. The guests were an incredible mix. Aristocrats and workers, CEOs of multinationals and neighborhood mechanics, Formula One drivers and millionaire collectors, but they all had one thing in common: respect for what Katerina and Stefan had built together. The ceremony was celebrated by the priest of the Geising district, Father Franz, who had known them since childhood, at least Stefan, and had seen their impossible love blossom. In his speech, he spoke of two people who had proven that true love arises when you overcome the fear of differences and embrace the beauty of what you can create together. The most moving moment was when Stefan's father, Hans Müller, 82, stood up to give a speech. He had worked with his hands his entire life, spoke little, and never in public. But on this day, he had something important to say. With a voice thick with emotion, he said that his son had always had a gift for fixing broken things. But Katerina wasn't broken. She was just lost. And together, they had found a way to build something beautiful, lasting, and important. Even Roberto Hoffman, Katerina's father, who had initially opposed this relationship with all his might, had to admit his mistake. In his speech, he confessed that he had always thought that a man's worth was measured by his bank account, but his daughter had taught him that it is measured by the passion with which he approaches life. During the celebration, journalists from around the world documented what they had called the wedding of the century, the princess of industry, who had chosen authentic love over social privilege. But the real triumph came when Sebastian Vettel, the German Formula One legend, stood up to make a surprise announcement. Ferrari had decided to entrust Müller-Hoffmann classic cars with the restoration of 10 historic Ferraris from the Maranello Museum. It was the most prestigious contract ever awarded to a private workshop. Vettel said that Katerina and Stefan represented what the greats of automotive engineering dreamed of: the perfect union of passion and expertise between art and technology, between heart and mind. The applause was deafening, but Katerina and Stefan looked into each other's eyes, knowing that the real success was not this million-dollar Kinofora. It was finding in each other the completeness they had always sought. 3 years after the wedding, Müller-Hoffmann classic cars had become a global benchmark. They had opened branches in Monaco, Los Angeles, and Tokyo, but the heart always remained in that small Munich workshop where it all began. Katerina had discovered she was pregnant and had decided to name the girl Ferrari in honor of the car that had brought them together. Stefan had laughed and agreed as long as their second child was named Porsche. Their story had made it into business school textbooks as an example of how love can transform a legacy into a calling and a personal passion into a global success story. But for them, it was simply proof that when two souls recognize each other, they can build something greater than the sum of their parts. Every evening before closing the workshop, Katerina and Stefan would stop in front of the red LaFerrari, which had been restored and preserved as a symbol of their story. The car was not for sale, nor was it even used. It just stood there, perfect and shiny, as a reminder that sometimes the most absurd bets lead to the most beautiful results. In retrospect, Katerina said one evening as she hugged Stefan, it had been the smartest bet of her life. Stefan replied that for him, it had been the most important repair of his career. He had not only repaired a machine, he had repaired two lives that did not know they were broken. Their daughter Ferrari, now 3 years old, ran around between the vintage cars and asked when she could learn to repair them like mom and dad. Looking at her, Katerina and Stefan knew that they were not only building a business, but a dynasty where the love of mechanical beauty would be passed down from generation to generation. The heiress who had never chosen anything in her life had finally chosen everything: love, work, happiness. And the mechanic who had always repaired other people's things had learned that the most important repair was that of two hearts that had found their way home. The bet had been won by both of them because sometimes the truest love comes from the most impossible promises. If this story has shown you that true love doesn't look at bank accounts, but at the passion in the heart, and that class differences disappear when two souls recognize each other, destroy that, like with all your might. Share to prove that sometimes the most absurd bets lead to the most beautiful results. Tell us in the comments, do you think Katerina did the right thing, risking everything for love? Do you think Stefan was really like that? Rich people are strange. Which moment in the story moved you the most? Subscribe now for more incredible stories of love that overcomes all social barriers, of couples who complement each other despite their differences, and of proof that authentic passion is worth more than any wealth.